why chasing her is the one thing that guarantees she leaves every piece of advice you have ever heard about persistence in love is technically true and completely wrong at the same time. You were told that the man who shows up, who fights for her, who refuses to give up is the man worth having. You watched it. In every film where the protagonist runs through an airport or stands in the rain outside her window and she opens the door. And everything resolves into the thing you were promised love could be. You absorbed this framework so completely that when you felt something slipping in a relationship, when the distance started growing and the responses got shorter and the warmth you remembered began retreating, your instinct was to pursue, to close the gap, to show her, through the sheer volume of your effort, that you were worth staying for. That instinct felt like love. It felt like strength. It was neither. What you were actually doing in those moments of intensified pursuit was communicating something you never intended to say. Every extra message sent into silence, every plan made to manufacture proximity, every softening of your own position to reduce the friction between you was transmitting a single signal. Beneath all the words, I am afraid you are leaving, and I need you to stay to prove that I am enough. She did not receive your pursuit as devotion. She received it as pressure, and underneath the pressure, she felt something shift in how she saw you. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow, cellular way that attraction actually works. The man she was drawn to had a gravity of his own. The man chasing her was borrowing his gravity from her approval, and the moment she sensed that, something essential between you began to unravel. The cruelty of this dynamic is that it is self-reinforcing. The more she pulls back, the more you pursue. The more you pursue, the more she pulls back. And at no point in this cycle does the man stop and ask the question that would break it. Open, why am I making her responsible for my sense of security? Not because he is stupid or weak, but because the fear driving the pursuit is loud enough to drown out every other signal. Fear has that quality. It narrows your vision to the single thing you are afraid of losing, and it makes every action feel justified because the feeling behind it is genuine. You genuinely care. You genuinely want her to stay. But caring and pursuing from fear are not the same thing, and she can feel the difference even when she cannot name it. This chapter is not about playing games or manufacturing. Distance as a tactic. What it reveals is the actual psychology underneath the chase, why it destroys the very thing it is trying to protect, and what it looks like to replace it with something that does not require you to abandon your own axis every time you feel someone you love beginning to drift. Attraction, at its most fundamental level, is not about how much you want someone. It is about what you're wanting. Communicates about your relationship to yourself. This is the thing that almost no one tells you plainly, and it is the key that unlocks the entire dynamic. When a woman senses that your emotional stability depends on her continued presence and approval, she does not feel loved. She feels weighted. She feels the invisible architecture of your need pressing against her. Freedom, and freedom, for anyone with a healthy sense of self, is not something that can be quietly surrendered without resentment following close behind. Picture a man who met someone extraordinary. The first 2 months were effortless. He was engaged with his own life, genuinely interested in her but not orbiting her, present when they were together but not anxious between the moments. He had things going on. He had opinions he did not soften. He had the particular quality of a man who was choosing her rather than needing her, and she felt that distinction in everything. In how he held a conversation, how he handled the moments when plans changed, how he said goodnight without extracting a promise that tomorrow would happen. She was drawn to him in the specific way that people are drawn to those who seem to have a complete life that does not require them to fill a vacancy. Then something shifted. She had a busy week. Her responses slowed, and he felt the first cold edge of uncertainty. Instead of noting it and returning to his own life, he leaned in. He suggested plans. When she was slow to confirm, he followed up. When she seemed distracted, he asked if everything was okay with a frequency that told her he was not asking about her well-being so much as auditing the status of her feelings toward him. He did not know he was doing this. From the inside, it felt like attentiveness. From the outside, it looked like a man whose center of gravity had quietly migrated from himself to her, and the version of him she had been attracted to the one with his own axis, seemed to have been replaced by someone tracking her every signal for evidence that he was still wanted. This is the mechanism that matters. Pursuit does not fail, because women want to be ignored or because there is virtue in withholding affection. It fails because compulsive pursuit is, at its core, a communication of low self-worth. It says, without words, I do not trust that I am enough without your constant reassurance, so I am going to keep generating reasons for you to give it to me. And the tragedy is that the more you chase, the less she can offer you what you're actually looking for, because what you are actually looking for is not more of her attention. It is a stable sense of your own value that does not require external verification to stay intact. The misconception men carry into this is that the solution is to chase less as a strategy, to manufacture restraint, to count hours before responding to messages, to create artificial distance as a technique for appearing less available. This is the dating advice industrial complex at its worst, and it does not work at the level that matters because it is still the same man, with the same unresolved need for validation, performing a role designed to obscure that need. She will feel the performance. People always feel the performance, the slight delay that does not match the energy, the withheld warmth that does not match the eyes. Tactical distance is just anxious pursuit wearing a mask, and it deserves the same outcome. The reframe is not about behavior management. It is about the underlying question of where your sense of value actually lives. You need to ask yourself, with the kind of honesty that is uncomfortable in the asking, when she pulls back, what exactly am I afraid of? Sit with that question long enough to get past the surface answer, which is usually something like losing her, and reach the actual answer underneath it, which is almost always something closer to, if she leaves, it will confirm something I already suspect about myself, that the suspicion, whatever its specific content, is the thing that needs your attention, not her behavior, not the relationship, the story underneath the fear, the one that says her departure would be a verdict rather than simply a change in circumstance. When you begin doing that work, something in your behavior changes without you having to manage it tactically. You stop pursuing from fear because the fear has less material to work with. You become genuinely more interested in your own life because your own life stops being the thing you're abandoning. Every time she seems distant, you develop the quality that was present in the beginning, the quality that drew her in, the quality of a man who is choosing the people in his life from fullness rather than reaching for them from emptiness. That quality is not a technique. It is not a posture you can borrow for a few weeks in return when it stops working. It is the natural expression of a man who has done the interior work of building a life and a sense of self that does not collapse when someone he loves takes a step back. The concrete challenge is this: the next time you feel the urge to pursue, to send the extra message, to manufacture the plan, to check in with a frequency that is about your anxiety rather than genuine connection. Stop for 60 seconds before you act and ask one question. Am I doing this because it will serve the relationship? Or am I doing this to manage my own discomfort? Be precise about the answer, not judgmental, just precise. If the honest answer is that you are managing your discomfort, then the work is not to text or not to text. The work is to sit with the discomfort long enough to understand what it is made of and where it comes from. That sitting, done consistently, is what changes the pattern at the root rather than pruning it at the surface. There is a version of love that most men were never shown and so never learned to aim for. It is not the love that grips. It is not the love that monitors and adjusts and calibrates its output based on the other person's temperature. It is the love that is secure enough to allow space, that trusts itself enough not to need constant confirmation, that can hold someone with an open hand rather than a closed fist and understand that what stays by choice is the only thing worth having at all. Getting there requires something most men find genuinely difficult, not because they lack the capacity, but because the culture that shaped them confused intensity with devotion and possession with love. You were taught, in 1,000 subtle ways, that the man who wants most is the man who loves most, and that wanting should express itself through pursuit, through effort, through the unceasing demonstration of how much you are willing to give up of yourself to keep the other person close. What that teaching produced in you is a reflexive tendency to abandon your own center the moment someone you care about seems to be moving away from it, And every time you do that, you become slightly less the person they were drawn to and slightly more the person they are trying to create distance from. The work, then, is not to become someone who cares less. It is to become someone whose caring does not require the other person to stay in a fixed position to remain intact. It is to build enough interior substance that your sense of self is not tethered to someone else's proximity. This does not make you distant. It makes you safe. And safety, the specific safety of being with someone who does not need you to be the source of their okayness, is one of the rarest and most attractive things a person can offer. The men who stop chasing are not the men who have stopped caring. They are the men who have finally cared enough about themselves to stop making someone else responsible for their stability. And in that shift, something remarkable tends to happen. The space they stop filling with pursuit gets filled, instead with the particular quality of presence that makes people want to stay, not because they are afraid of disappointing you, but because being near you feels like being near something real. She does not want to be chased. She wants to stay. And those two things require entirely different versions of you two. Make them possible.